Kia ora koutou, ko Lisa Chant tōku ingoa. This research journey started in 2017. Now there are a couple of videos that will be at the end of this presentation which were made really for the participants so that they could have a look on the website and see what the research was about or planning to be about and decide whether or not they wished to participate. So if you want to have a look at those, there's one where I'm talking with Clayton Rangitutia, who is from Te Puna Hauora o Te Raki Pai Whenua, a Māori health and social services provider on the North Shore of Auckland, and I'm explaining why the research journey took place. There's also another video interview explaining why I've used video interviews as a source of sharing this information with you. There's also an introduction from myself talking about me, why I'm doing this, and why the research was called Maraea, etc. So those are at the end of this presentation. Hui Hana Maraea Hopa with her granddaughter Livia Marsden. Kia ora koutou, ko Lisa Chant tōku ingoa. Hello, my name is Lisa Chant. Welcome to my home. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the Maraea project, which is the research that you're looking at if you're on this website. And before I do that, because I am Māori from Aotearoa, New Zealand, it's traditional that I actually tell you a little bit about myself and where I'm from. Where I'm from being more important than about myself, quite frankly. So, ko Ngāti Whātua tōku iwi. That means my tribe of my family members is called Ngāti Whātua. We call them iwi here. I'm from Te Uriahau, so ko Te Uriahau tōku hapu. Now hapu is a word that means both pregnant and a sub-tribe, so that's kind of like your smaller immediate family. And mine are called Te Uriahau. Te Uri, the descendants of Homo Wairangi, who is one of our eponymous ancestors, from the Kaipara Harbour. So, ko Kaipara tōku moana, so that means my moana, my sea, is the Kaipara Harbour. Interestingly, we call it the river, or an awa. It's a very large inland harbour, but it has lots of tributaries, so we tend to think of it in our minds as a river. And my family are fishers from a little town called Tinalpai, which means very good in Māori, which is a great name. Our whānau lands are probably about 7 miles around the coast to walk from that little town, which has a wharf and a little tin shed that has a petrol pump outside it and a couple of grocery items available, and that's about it in terms of what's available. We've got a little community hall that we also use. So that's about my whānau and where I'm from up on the Kaipara Harbour. Tinalpai has probably got population 400 maybe on a good day. In summer a lot of people come there because it's obviously a harbour for holidays, etc. So the history of this research project is it's inspired by the wahine, or the woman in my whānau, and it's named for my grandmother. Her name was Hui Hana Maraea Hopa. The middle name is the one that I've used for the name of this project because a marae is a meeting house, and so o tamatea is the meeting house that is the main meeting house for my part of the tribe of Ngāti Whātua. And my great-grandmother actually came from Tainui, and she was from around a place called Taupiri. And when she was born, her whānau were gifting her, if you like, the name Maraea, meaning the person who will serve the marae. Now the marae is not only our meeting house and our home, but it's also often depicted by iwi as a visual representation of our ancestors. So there may be carvings or other forms of art inside that building that depict our ancestors and connect us to the whenua or the land that it's on. I've also heard a lot of people describe their marae as the womb of the tribe, or the female body that is the eponymous ancestor of the tribe. There are various ways that the Maraea is described by various iwi. The naming of my great-grandmother rather, in order to sort of say she will be someone who serves the marae, is quite symbolic, because when you're given a name, often what comes next is the role that you're kind of being brought up to do. So Maraea, the person that cares for the home base, if you like. My mother was named Libya Marama Alexandria, because she had an uncle who was injured in Libya in the Second World War, who was evacuated to the Alexandria Hospital, Egypt, and survived. Now the name Marama is the important one, the one in the middle, because Marama was the name of the hospital at a very large Māori developed complex when my mother was very young. She was born in the 40s. And that marae complex and religious complex and Māori complex was called Ratana, after a person who was a prophetic leader for Māori. And my family would go huge distance down to Ratana every Christmas, and they'd go with the tribe and a big group, and they would stay down there. And on this place was a hospital called Whare, which means house, Marama, and so that was the name of the hospital. So by naming her for someone who was injured who recovered, and putting in the middle of it the name of the hospital, they were hoping they would get a nurse from this newborn baby, which of course is what they got. My mother is a Māori nurse. So my great-grandmother was instrumental in the development of o Tamatea Marae. My grandmother, Wātariri Henari Toka, was instrumental in the development of Tinopai Marae. And she was on the committees and took the minutes and did a whole lot of other stuff. Really interestingly, someone bought a minute book for me to look at when I was doing minutes at Tinopai Marae one time, and said, oh, have a look at this. And I'm looking at my writing and I'm thinking, oh, that's beautiful. I've been very tidy there. And then I realised it was all in Te Reo Māori, whereas I was writing the minutes in English. And I was thinking, I don't remember doing that. I'm sure I didn't do that. And it turned out it was my grandmother's handwriting. So this is someone who lived in the back blocks, miles from anywhere. She stayed on the land and looked after her parents and grandparents. She didn't marry and leave the lands. And she had this beautiful writing, which no doubt she picked up from school. But her writing and my writing were absolutely identical. I couldn't tell the difference. I never met my grandmother. She used to be a person who would look after problematic children and from the family. And she rode out one day to pick up one of my uncles who was quite young, or I think it was one of my mother's cousins. Something had gone awry, and she'd ridden the horse into town the village, to pick him up and bring him back out to the homelands to, help out a bit. And she was thrown from her horse. He was all right, but she was killed. So I never did get to actually meet her. So she was instrumental in Tinopai Marae. My mother, whose name is Livia, because somebody wrote it wrong, and even though they started with Libya, they ended up with Livia. She, as I said, is a Māori nurse, and she established at an urban marae complex within my tribal lands. We've got a big city called Auckland, and in one of those suburbs of that city, an urban marae complex was established in the 90s called Awataha Marae. And my mother decided to set up a Māori community health provider, GP, nurse, social service provider, when the funding became available from government. She'd been a district nurse in the area for many years, and the local rest home was so delighted with her idea. They donated their old building that they were no longer using, that could be moved to the marae and turned into a health clinic. So that marae started in the mid-90s, and a health clinic, and there was also a childcare centre. So that one is still in operation, and it's called Te Puna Hauora, or Te Rakipai Whenua. And you'll see Clayton Rangitutia interviewed as part of this research project, and he works at that marae, and he is a whāngai into our whānau. Whāngai means you're not born into the family, but you are part of the family. And his mother, Brenda, has been my older sister, I think, since I was in my 20s. And so Clayton is part of the extended whānau. So he's been partially brought up, obviously, by my, as is traditional, you get brought up by your grandparents. So my mother has been his grandmother for all of this since he was born. And he now works in the health clinic that she set up. And you can see him talking about some of his experiences both as a child and working, as it were, in his local community in mental health. So there's a little bit of a connection to why the name Maraea for this project. In terms of me and marae, because of course these female lines sort of down through time, you end up doing things that are, I suppose, what your grandparents expected of you and your parents expected of you. So my mother got me involved with helping out with the Māori health provider when she got it set up. My field was public policy, but also management and administration. So I helped set up patient management systems, staff training and development systems, all of the policy and compliance, legislative requirements, etc. for the organisation. And also helped them get funding to be able to put together the type of community focused organisation that they wanted, which meant getting money from other charitable organisations rather than just money from the government for straight health services. So I helped with putting together some of their proposals for funding and things like that. I went on to become a lecturer at the University of Auckland, and I worked in the Māori Studies Department for 5 years. So I was associated with Waipapa Marae, because there were about half a dozen of us staff there who were responsible for the marae. The primary responsibility for the marae was Rangi Maraea and Meri, who were, I mean, they give them stupid titles like secretary or something like that, but they were really the bosses of the department, of course, and still are, and the marae, and they were the mothers and the grandmothers of the marae, really. And so I ably assisted bringing in the milk and singing a few waiata and stuff like that. I taught in that marae, which was really lovely. I was able to take a lot of the classes in there and bring the students in. The students were welcome to bring their whānau members and children and grandparents, anybody else they wanted, and we would have some fabulous lessons in that marae. So I have a fondness for Waipapa Marae. For about 10 years I was on the runanga of a polytechnic called Unitech in Auckland, and I was the Ngāti Whātua representative. One of the things that we developed in that period was a marae. Unitech were very committed to putting a beautiful marae on their grounds, and it is magnifique. It's called Te Kōtahitanga, which means it's all about unity between all of us. So those are two marae that I have been associated with. So I guess the tradition of marae has continued.
So this research project, I started off because we had a group of young people I was working with a few years ago who were cutting themselves, and you know, there was also there was also some involvement with using drugs that were being supplied by some local people who were giving these children drugs and swapping for sex. And because these children were sort of 11, 12, 13, and we were all scrambling our brains trying to figure, heck, what do we do with these children? That and many other things that I saw made me think, we came up with some great ideas for these kids, this was a few years ago now, but I was thinking, what is it that actually can work for these children? With some of them, their parents didn't know what was going on. With some of them, their parents did know and were involved and were perfectly happy about their children being in that situation. And then you had the school who realised something was wrong but couldn't quite figure out what it was or what to do about it or how to help. These kids were, they referred to the hospital mental health services who did nothing. One of my kaimahi, one of my staff, had one of the kids who'd cut herself, but she was bleeding fairly profusely. And so she took the child to the hospital, and they said, oh, no, you need to take this child around the corner to the mental health team. Child's still bleeding. So get around there to the mental health team, who are Māori. And the mental health team said, oh, yeah, nothing to do with us. Child's still bleeding. Now, the people, as I understand it, that were interacted with were nurses. Can you imagine how unamused I was? So all of the steps we've taken as Māori to try to do the right thing by Māori inside the health system sometimes falls through the gaps, and some of the children that we were helping weren't Māori. They were Pākehā, or they were white. It was really challenging because we wanted to come up with ideas that would work for all children, but the kaimahi who we had who were working with us were Māori, so they come from this Māori perspective of what we should do for all of these children. But is that going to be kind of acceptable to the non-Māori parents? How do we kind of explain what we're doing to help these children and their families to the school teachers who are just like, no, this is just a problem child, get it away from us. Or there were also school teachers who were like, oh, we'll do anything to help these children because we really, really want to do our best for them. And that's often the situation when we come across, something that's happening with children, is that there are people that want to help, there are people that don't want to help. But in the middle of it, as a child who's suffering, or in the case of that child, bleeding, that person was a social worker, and after that happened, she ran and found one of our own nurses who dressed the wound, sterilised and dressed the wound, which should have been the most basic thing that a hospital should have provided. And I could sit here. If I started telling you stories that I've seen like that around the world, we'd probably be here for 6 months. It's not an uncommon story. But on a positive note, I thought to myself, I've seen some really awesome stuff. We see some really awesome stuff that's working for kids. And I thought, what about if we got together some of these ideas from people that have worked with children, and actually video them and say what's working, and maybe put it all together as some little ideas on a website that anybody can look at and get some ideas. Because when I started working with young children that had fetal alcohol or fetal drug or other issues, I wasn't sure what I was doing. And so I was really lucky I got to ask a lot of people and say, what do you reckon? Or how do I do this? Or what's your experience? Or what can you tell me? But because I work in health, it was easy for me to access those people and ask them those questions. And I just thought, some of these kids, you've seen some of them, they are really hard to handle, and you can't take them out of the house much because they will do such serious harm to themselves. And I know there were a number of times I sat at home with a child who was just calmer in a home environment. And when they were calm, I had a few moments to reflect. Would have been nice to just be able to maybe jump on a website and hear some words of wisdom from people that might have calmed me down at the time or helped me out. And I was talking to this guy. He's from Australia, Aboriginal guy, he's alcohol and drug counsellor. And he works in this enormous region in the middle of nowhere across 3 tribal regions. Where there are hardly any resources, and he's the only AOD person up there, every age group, for everybody. And I was talking to him about this idea, before I turned it into a research project, and he said to me, that's a really good idea, because he said sometimes it's just been such hard work. It'd be nice to come home at the end of the day and maybe turn something on like that and just watch it and hear somebody else that's doing a job the same as I am in Canada or the US or New Zealand or something, talking about kind of what they've experienced or what worked for them. So he said, I can feel a bit uplifted by just hearing from someone that's doing the same mahi or the same work as me, and know that I'm not alone. And I was like, oh.
Alright, so let me tell you a little bit about the research project, and I'm going to read directly from the participant information sheet so that there's actually just some consistency of information happening here. The main aim of this research is to explain some Indigenous health practitioner ways of supporting children with substance misuse issues, and obviously their families, in New Zealand, Australia, the United States and Canada. I'm concerned with the lack of a platform for shared experiences of Indigenous health practitioners between the 4 countries. I aim to offer distinctly Indigenous ways of understanding how children misusing substances can be supported, including through resilience in the Indigenous health workforce. So it's a 2-pronged thing. What are people doing that's helping these children and their families? That's the first prong. The second prong is, how do we as an Indigenous health workforce find a level of connectivity around these ideas to perhaps not only inform each other and share with each other, but really to awhi tautoko, to really support each other, because it's an overwhelming area in which to work, and it is very easy to be so focused on your mahi, on your work, that you don't take the time to step back and go, hey, this is going really well, or hey, I should share this, or oh gosh, I'd like to hear what somebody else is doing because that would be really interesting. So I thought video-based knowledge would be a really good way of sharing that information. And I know that with most Indigenous people that I've hung out with in the last 30 years, talking is more powerful than writing for a lot of people. And particularly working in hauora, working in health, a lot of the best kaimahi, a lot of the best workers I've worked with don't read and write that well. And they just do, and they just do the stuff. And we have 2 words that are really interesting in Māori, which, and I always say words in the English term, and it's not really, they're philosophies. One is called mātauranga, which effectively means knowledge, and the other one is mōhiotanga, which is how we practice that knowledge. But it's a deeper sense of, it's so imbued in us that we do it without thinking. And I think if you have a look at the interview with Clayton about, I'm talking to him about doing kapahaka, which is, it is the sacred movement and song or chants that explain who we are and what we are about. And we do this often as a group, as a form of shared identity. And it's a really powerful form of identity and well-being for our people. And Clayton, I got Clayton talking about what I'd seen him doing with some of the younger children in the community at the school that he'd gone to as a child, around this whole thing of urban identity when you're off your tribal lands, but still trying to find as a group of children a sense of identity. And he wouldn't have described it that way, because to him it was just, as a child, kapahaka was really important to me. Now I understand it better as an adult. I can probably really help these children to feel more grounded in their urban identity if I go and support them while they're doing this. So he has the mātauranga, he has the knowledge. He could probably put it together that knowledge would actually really make a strengthening place of standing, tūranga waiwai, for those children. But that's not what he was thinking about. He was thinking about, I identify with those children because that was my school. I'm from this urban area, this urban community as well, and I want to have fun with these kids, doing something with them. So he would have done it just because his mōhiotanga told him that's the right thing to do for me with these children. And then some bozo comes along and goes, oh, can you tell us the model that you used to work with those children? And what's the pedagogy of how you put that together? And blah, blah, blah. And of course, from an academic perspective, that is really important to understand, because it's one pathway of teaching and learning and sharing knowledge and translating knowledge. But in actual fact, I want to talk to people and not have them think that way. We can put that all together afterwards. I want to hear and see what they are doing on the ground that makes them feel that their heart and soul is singing with the people that they're working with. So that's why video, that's why interviews, and that's a little bit of an introduction as to what the research is focusing on.